Okay, well, that's great start to this because I'm just going to give a sort of an overview of what I do and a little bit of decision making and how the role of the conservation officer. So I'm going to talk about what we do in determining applications for alterations to windows. I'm going to give you an example of a typical sash window, and I'm going to give you a sash window because those are the ones I know best and the ones that I think are more sensitive to change. We spoke about character just now. Tom was speaking about character, and the Act says, well, we need to define the special architectural and historic interest of a listed building and the character appearance of a conservation area, and they are different. One is individual, one is group, which does make a difference. And what do we talk about when we're preserving the character? So same but different. There is a lot of that, and these windows that we've seen today are testimony to same but different, which we'll have a look at. And do we want to lose these windows for something that's, not quite what we lost? Energy efficiency and the ease of use of windows. I think the biggest threat to our windows at the moment is energy efficiency, EPC ratings, things like that. And we are getting applications hard and fast, and we need to sort this out somehow. About 8 years ago, there was a decision in Westminster, 119 Ebury Street, which got BREEAM Excellent, and we'll find out what they did with their windows there. Glass, we've had all the things I'm going to discuss, we've discussed in much more detail, so I'll recap on the different points as quickly as I can. We don't see a lot of historic glass because I'm going to be focusing on sort of bog standard terraces and not the more special buildings that we've been looking at up till now. How to repair and draft proof is at the way forward, and guidance. What guidance are we following? There is a plethora of guidance out there. And how, if you're going to put an application in, you can spare the wrath of the conservation officer. And then we're going to have a little ode to the lost Georgian window. So the role of the conservation officer with windows will either be for a listed building or a conservation area. And as we've described, we need to preserve the special architectural historic interest or the character appearance. So how do we actually do that? It's very, very difficult because we base our decision-making on experience, and we are often accused of being subjective. We accuse people of being subjective too. So if you're a novice conservation officer, where are you going to start making your decisions from? You've got your degree, or you've worked in the field and you're a carpenter or something, and you've decided to come in and it's on your table. What are you going to do? So you will look at you'll look at the Acts, you'll look at the National Planning Policy Framework, the Planning Practice Guidance, Historic Environment, and Historic England Guidance. There is also independent guidance out there from the IHBC and lots of other bodies that are thrown into the mix. And who writes this guidance is quite important. What role are they in that pecking order? So I think I'm going to talk about the sash because I think it's the one that's most disfigured when it's altered. And it's also the window that people give up on most easily because it really is the most difficult to fix, as we've seen. It requires skilled people, and there are not a lot of skilled people out there. So the principles will be valid for any window of historic interest. And the casement, as we've seen amply, it's the historic casements are much more complicated. The metal ones, the leaded lights, had often already been altered. So a lot of what I was going to talk about has already been covered, but just in a nutshell, we have 350 years of the sash window. We've gone from 12/12 to 9/9 to 6/6 to margin lights to Victorian era 2/2, the Edwardian suburbs, which had multi-pane, and then single units underneath. Interestingly, the Regency windows actually had the technology to a certain degree in the early Victorians to do larger panes, but they chose not to have larger panes because they thought they didn't look very nice. So that's quite an interesting point when considering contemporary architecture, which has no subdivision a lot of the time. And the sash as well, the later Georgian sash and the Victorian sashes are really were things of beauty. And I think we might have to pop that word into the equation because we don't talk about it. We're very scientific in our assessment of things. And we do go to, historic towns and villages. We don't expect to see a double glazed, powder coated window. We do want to go and see the historic windows. And it's important that each era has its window designed not only with the window, the craftsman, the technologies, the history that's associated with it. Every window tells a story, which by making it a replace or for an energy efficiency, which is a common argument we get, is losing all of that fine-tuning and what we can't see, essentially, because it's history. All right. So how to get a conservation officer really annoyed. So you'll come in with an application to change your window, which comes with a heritage statement, which says, basically, I want to change my window and they're going to look exactly the same. That's not what a heritage statement should say. It should assess the significance, the importance, the history of the window, the age of the timber, but they don't. They just say they look exactly the same. And then you sort of dig a bit deeper and they say, look, they're too old, they're too leaky, I want new ones, let me have new ones, my life will be easier. And then you prod a little bit deeper. And usually the thing is, I've had somebody come and have a look, but it's just too complicated. I don't have the time. I've got to get on with my life and we don't have the people around here to fix them. And even if I do fix them, they're still going to be single glazed. So why bother? So often it comes down to people not actually knowing how old their windows are, or what profiles they have, or how often they've been painted, or why they're not working. The number of times I've had, we can't get this secondary glazing to work, we can't get to the window's rotted. And there's all this talk, and then finally you go on site and the window looks absolutely fine. So you're like, right, okay, so the reason people really do want to replace their windows is because they've sort of given up, and the shiny new one suddenly looks so appealing, especially when it's coming up to Christmas and you've got the family over and stuff like that. It's just there's so many aspects we've seen to what we do, but what we forget, and this is, as I said, the most common application we get is to change the windows for energy efficiency. But what people forget, energy efficiency is not part of the argument for why you want to change your listed building or why you want to make alterations to your window in a conservation area. So for the moment, we have to sort of disregard that. And let's have a look what's next. So let's pretend someone just wants to get rid of their older windows because they're old and they've had enough of them. The conservation officer says, look, you can easily repair the window. They just think, oh, God, I haven't got the time. So if we're talking about special interest, loss of fabric, the loss of historic fabric is really important. It used to be really emphasised in, older guidance. It was, fabric first approach. That's changing very much at the moment with, these additional pressures. And at the moment, we don't have robust guidance to say that. There was a time at the time English Heritage was saying original windows are removed countrywide at a rate of 1 per minute. Of course, fashions change, production methods change, things happen, but we don't rate them. Nobody knows how many are left. There is a concept of enoughness. Is there enoughness? When the last one's gone, is anyone going to actually notice? Most probably not, is the answer. So, if we don't get a handle on all of this, they will become extinct. It's interesting, the discussion earlier about whether it's a listed building or a conservation area or whether it's just a historic building. People should be making the assessments of this, not having to rely on legislation. So we're not only losing history, we're losing craftsmanship, history of that building, special profiles. Even if it were replicated like for like, you're not going to have the timber quality, even if you retain the original glass. And really, this is a huge opportunity, if anyone in government is here, to train people up, to get people, as we discussed earlier, doing more practical courses. So at the end, they're not really the same when you remove an original window. So I just thought to make an analogy, to look at a classic car. So I don't actually know much about cars, but I do quite like this Jag, so I thought it'd be quite a good example. And it's a classic car, and the one on the right is also a classic car. Apparently, it will soon be a classic car, and they're both similar. So the question is, pretend that the Jag, as a classic car, is a timeless design and has technological or nostalgic value, is a Grade 2 listed building. If you owned this car, would you change the hubs for the one of the modern building, of the modern Jag, which might work better? Hands up who would change them. Yeah, keep them down. Okay, hands up for a no. Any fence sitters? Okay, good. Whew, we're in the right place. Okay, would you change the steel hubcaps for alloys? Hands up if you would. Hands up if you wouldn't. Okay, we're friends here. Good. So that's basically what we're talking about, changing technologies, changing materials, changing things. So this is an example of a natural sash. And this is a very typical application. We get applications for 12mm slim double-glazed units, which actually normally get increased to 16mm because they realise that with 12mm you just don't get the U values. So this is a typical example. This applicant it's so infuriated that we didn't want him to remove his windows. He's gone to appeal. He's going to lose. If he doesn't, I'll resign. Here you have said it. So just looking at the differences in size, I think you can more or less see the increases. Most probably from that distance, they're not that, but actually most probably from about row 4, or row 3 is going to be quite important. So the bottom rail has an increase of 2.5 centimetres, they're not a lot, 69%. Meeting rails, 1.1 centimetre, 52%. Depth of meeting rails, 63%. The distance between the frame and the bottom of the top rail, 100%. Glazing bar width, 10%. However, it's actually shorter in the depth, so it looks quite squat now. It looks more oval than lamb's tongue. And the glazing bar depth is that the right math? 530%. So if you actually look at it as a mathematical exercise, we've not got the same window at all. And people do perceive tiny differences very easily, although we don't think we do. We all do. Most people don't fixate on it in the same way we do, but they know. So, so Hugh Lander, I don't know if you know him. If you don't know him, read his books. He's a great wit and very perceptive. I've been trying to find out who has the rights so I can quote him, but he said, the modern sash framing tends to be uniform 45mm from front to back, while the Regency ones and earlier were often as little as 35. We have 45 here in this application. You might suppose that the odd 10mm makes little difference, but in fact it can have a pronounced effect on the appearance of the sash bar mouldings. Modern 45mm windows often look rather coarse, even when the type of moulding is much the same. Now, we don't use that language anymore because we just don't use that judgmental language anymore, but it's the right word if we were to use that language, in my opinion. So people say, okay, look, I just want to save energy. So we say, okay, let's look at it, some facts and figures. So this chart, which I couldn't get to be any bigger, is about U values. So at the bottom, we have the single glazed window, which is the worst, which is why we're all here. If you put a bit of low emissivity glass on, it's still only 4.2. If you have slim, you must probably hear tomorrow, people will correct me on this, but this is 2020 Historic England guidance. 3.2, so that's slim double glazed units with air. Slim double glazed units with gas, we've got a bit better, we're at 2. Vacuum insulating glass, 1.6. It's not competition between the two sides of the room, but it is interesting. And then we have single glazing plus single low emissivity secondary glazing. We're doing pretty well here, but not quite as good as single glazing with slim or double glazed secondary glazing, or even better, single glazing, keep your single glazing and use vacuum secondary glazing. and then you get 1.4. It's got to be secondary glazing. And it's only that option that meets the current building regs. None of the others do. So if you're not doing that, and you're not going to get some massive double-glazed, proper grown-up double-glazed units, you're just fiddling around the edges. This may be not what everyone wants to hear, and most probably tomorrow everyone will just completely disagree with me, but there you go. So the other interesting thing, which I have discussed with people here today, is the longevity of double-glazed units. And people have said who are marketing them that they just don't last very long. So even these figures are based on figures that of complete units, which break down the moment, essentially, that you're likely to get them. Okay, so, and windows were designed to be slightly drafty. So anyway, that's historic England take on it. Public benefit, if you want to change your windows and you are hell-bent on doing it, you're going to have to show us some public benefit, all right, because that's what the MPPF requests. So hands up, are lower household bills a public benefit? Is preserving our heritage a public benefit? Yes. Are removing all traces of our historic detailing and timbers a public benefit? Is disposing of an historic window a public benefit? Is the energy production created by a new window, transportations and disposal costs the environment a public benefit? Right. Is saving the planet a public benefit? Okay, right. So that is a public benefit. So if we want to save the planet, we don't need to put double glazing in historic windows. That's the answer, because we have lots of other options, which we will, I'll touch on briefly, but we will hear about. So how many old buildings do we have? Only 1 in 5 is pre-1918. So if we're fixating on energy efficiency, which is what we've been hearing, there is again this argument of enoughness. So let's look after them a bit more. I haven't spoken about secondary glazing, which can be obviously the units. You can make them in wood. You could, in Northern Europe, they were designed with secondary glazing in timber because it was colder. It is colder up there. Now we've actually got a problem with overheating. It's a different problem that we have now. Even if you do have your your windows will be open much more. We heard earlier, people don't open their windows early enough. We're obsessed with keeping the energy in, and I think tomorrow we will find out more about interior, the quality of air, and do we really need all this heat in there? So my solution to this, if they are original, is to keep your windows and put acrylic sheets on them, either with Magna Glaze, or I've seen there's another nice new option over there with the individual panes. Yes, fantastic over there. Both sides doing very well. And it's interesting because acrylic panes do not yellow. They do not scratch, and they're not very expensive. So what's not to like? And you just take them off, when the sun comes out, which is happening more often. Okay, so we talk about the quality of timber. I'm not going to go into that. So very quickly, because I don't have a lot of time, this is 111 Ebury Street, and it's got the BREEAM Excellent. And I happened to be working at Grosvenor at the time, and then 2 weeks later I was working at Westminster City Council. So I saw both sides of the argument, and I had to laugh because they were completely different. I, of course, was on the conservation officer's side, but I didn't tell Grosvenor that. So they tried out, at the time, this was 2011, this all started. They had all the latest technologies, including the Pilkington vacuum glass, which everyone thought was really exotic, and they really pushed to change the glass to the slim double-glazed units or the vacuum. And the council were like, no, not happening. We do not want you to lose integrity of those rebates. Once they're gone, they're gone. So you're not going to change them. You're not going to replace them. And so, no, sorry. So they put their thinking hats back on again and insulated the walls. We had a discussion yesterday earlier about wall-to-window proportions. These are these window proportions quite high in relationship, and nonetheless, they have managed to get an 86% reduction in forecast operational CO2 emissions. Way beyond it was even a requirement. Glass, I don't need to talk about that because we've spoken about glass. Plate glass looks very different. It's float glass, very different. If you get 2 layers of it, it looks different and it's a different colour. even if you can replicate all the original colours, it's difficult to know which colours to replicate. This is especially important actually in a conservation area, which I'm sure we'll have questions about. But in conservation areas, there is a certain amount of PD, but it has to be like for like. The materials have to look like for like. So how far a conservation officer wants to put it depends whether they want to go to appeal. And conservation officers know how to handle them usually. So we've had glass. So my advice is if someone wants to change their windows, it's the meeting rails, the low rail and the sill that usually go. So you fix them with some talented person, of which there are not many, but you've met some today, you can call them. You add brushes to the meeting rail. That makes a huge difference to the staff piece, the parting bead, scarf in when it's rotten, adjust the weights, repaint, put the sheets in. Then you get better air tightness than where you only change the double glazed units, because it's the window that loses it's the surround that loses a lot of the air, not just the panes. So you stick your acrylic sheet up in the colder months, keep one window open for ventilation there and one there. Job done. This is a video that I saw from a lady in Lewis, if anyone's interested. It's lovely, it explains it to you. It's Eco Lewis. Guidance. Now, I'm glad Historic England hasn't come, because Historic England has put out, which I didn't know what kind of audience was going to be here today, but I see you're all quite sustainability focused. The guidance that has just been prepared is, I don't personally think it meets the requirements of the MPPF or the Act. It's a bit of a blunt tool, and it's blunt in the wrong direction. I've written to Historic England, like many of you have, to say that it just doesn't cut the mustard, it's just not good enough, and we'll lose our windows, in one fell swoop if it's approved. Let's see what happens with that. I would have liked Historic England to have a discussion, but they're not here. So when can you change your windows? When they look like that, change them. Put double glazing in, put vacuum glazing in, all good if you're going to get the arrangement better, unless, of course, you're in a conservation area, and then we'll have a discussion later about how to deal with that, because then that's the terrace that needs, it's the terrace that's important. Right, so the conclusions. There is no replacement for knowledge. If you're a new conservation officer, learn your stuff, because you're not going to read it in the heritage statement. Come to events like this, learn from the people who know. Don't be bullied. And lots of people are bullied with these applications, and especially if you have conservation area advisory groups, they're like, yeah, change them, they're going to be more energy efficient. And, new officers won't do that. I cut my teeth in Kensington and Chelsea with the most conservative with a small c person, Helena Benesh, and I'm very glad that I was in the school of the Benesh, because all that stayed with me for life, despite lots and lots of different changes in guidance. Period dramas, do we really want those spacer bars in our period dramas? And I do practice what I preach. I've got single glazed original windows, single glazed. And lastly, I asked ChatGPT to write an ode to an altered Georgian window. And this is what it came up with. I'll read it to you, because I don't know if you can see it. Oh, window once so fair of Georgian birth, your panes once graced with elegance and mirth. In slender flames you held the world outside, a vision of the past where dreams abide. But now, alas, your charm has lost its sheen, slim double-glazed, a modern harsh machine. No longer do you boast that fragile grace, your beauty marred a sadness in your face. These new panes, though they guard from cold and storm, have altered you and stripped away your form. The multi-pane allure so delicately spun, now overshadowed by what progress has done. Where once was grace, the latticework so fine, now stands a look distorted by design. The light that danced upon your ancient glass, now stifled, muted as the moments pass. In seeking warmth, you've sacrificed your soul. It's quite good. Your slender frames replaced a heavy toll. The whispers of the past now faint and weak. In every altered pane, a tear does speak. O window dear, we mourn what you have lost, the elegance now tangled, tempest tossed. For in thy quest to modernize and save, we've buried beauty in a silent grave. Yet let us not forget the charm you bore, the fragile grace, the tales you told before. May we remember, even as you change, the timeless art within your narrow range. So to the double-glazed unit we raise our voice, a lament for the lost, not by choice. In every altered pane an ode we sing to the beauty gone, the memories they bring. Thank you.